All right, we're live. The thumbs up. So, welcome to Our Bright Future with Martin Richtsfeld. We're so excited today to meet Martin and to share this conversation with you guys. This conversation has been coming for some time in the Ownstream community. We've been having a lot of conversations, a lot of threads in the network about technology, our relationship to technology, privacy, how do we stop feeding the system, how do we have a conscious relationship with technology. And we had a couple calls within the community and then said it's time to bring in some experts to help us. And someone brought up Martin and said that they were taking your online course, Martin, and that you might be really great to talk to us. And so we reached out, and in the interim, we've had such a lovely exchange planning this conversation over the last few weeks. And I said when I was writing this up, Martin, that I thought you were just the perfect person to engage with our community on this topic because you come from a place of expansion and not wanting to talk in a place of fear, but awareness to create solutions, and also with the lens of creating a new world. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for being here. And for those listening, we were just joking about how we have a lot to cover in about an hour and a half. And Martin's gone through some of the questions submitted. So we're going to try to cover as much as we can. But Martin is also going to be offering workshops in the Ownstream community on these topics starting next week. So if we don't get to every practical question today, we'll be doing, Martin's going to be organizing in part based on the questions that came in and what arises, the content for those workshops. So Martin, knowing that we have a lot to cover, maybe we can just start with a little bit of background. So I kind of joked when I wrote up the write-up for this interview that you started studying cybersecurity in the 2000s when I was just starting to use email. So I'm just curious about how you got into this area, like what called you to this area, and how has that shifted in the time since?
Good question. I was actually 18, and there was like civil service or the army. And I didn't really know what to do at 18. I just finished school. And during this year of introspection, I unfortunately did the army. Now I would choose the civil service, but back then, yeah, different mindset, I would say. Yes, somehow there is no proper translation for the study I did, but it's a mix of information technology and economics. And I was interested in both, and it was completely different than what I expected, but it was perfect. So the universe kind of led me the right way. And in the last 2 it was the bachelor, 3 years, and then 2 years the master. And it was interesting because I recently talked with someone, and I mean, the IT infrastructure has changed so much in the last 20 years. There was no Facebook, there was no iPhone, there was like no iPad. So most of what we have here now didn't exist 20 years ago. And seeing how this progressed over time was really interesting.
Yeah, it's a hugely different world. I literally was just starting to use email in the early 2000s. It's archaic compared to now.
I think my first email sent was in 1998. I had one of those Apple laptops that looked like a stealth bomber. It was black and it was like really cool. Like little did we know it was coming. But maybe kind of just summarize, if you would, like how have things changed, and why is it that what makes this moment so important? You know, there's a lot obviously in the there's a sense amongst many of us that a lot of information is being censored and diluted, and so why is it that why is it now the perfect time for us to really be looking at this, and and maybe you could kind of summarize like what we're up against. Like, is this going to be like a really big undertaking? I think a lot of us have that feeling of like, oh my God, this is going to be so hard to
Mhm.
kind of extract myself from these systems, but maybe it isn't. But I'd love to hear you share about those questions.
So to get to your first question, what has changed? A while ago I looked into companies and their scandals regarding privacy, and obviously Facebook was on the top on the top of the list. And I can't remember the year, but I think it was 2013 where people were devastated that whatever they posted would show up on their wall so everyone could see it. And that's like the main feature of Facebook we have now. And so on and so forth. But what this shows is that this change, and we experienced this in the last 1 or 2 or 3 years as well, changes are not happening suddenly because people wouldn't accept them. But when you gradually, step by step, introduce changes with whatever the agenda is at the end of the day, then people start to accept it. And just yesterday, I heard, I can't remember, it's like mask phobia, something like this. So people that cannot not wear the masks anymore. And so these things are kind of, and I mean, let's imagine we would have talked about that 2 years ago. So this gradual introduction of changes that happened over the last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, brought us to where we basically are. And it needed that time because people wouldn't accept the change within a super short time.
Yeah.
So that's one thing just to be aware of. And I mean, I remember when I still had like my big phone, which was much bigger than the smartphones now. And then I heard, well, there will be phones, or in the future, there will be phones, all the phones will have GPS. And I was like, no, I'm not getting a phone with GPS because then they can track me anywhere. But it's almost impossible now to get a phone without GPS. And there are always ways to kind of obscure your GPS location. But at the end, you don't, almost like a smartphone without a GPS doesn't exist. And why is it now important? There is something that I call, or I don't call it like I experienced it, I heard it, it's called a filter bubble or the rabbit hole. It's basically the same thing. And so when you look something, when you search for something on, let's take Google as bad example. When you search something on Google, you will not find the truth. You will find what you are searching for. But people mistake it for the truth. And that's why, well, I found it on Google, so it must be true. And I find the complete opposite. And well, my reality is also true because I found it on Google. And so Google or Facebook or you name them, they feed the people because at the end of the day, it's about screen time. They want to keep you on the screen. And if they feed you something, if they give you something that you don't like, then you will not stay. But if they feed you with like the rabbit hole that you like, then you will stay on screen. And that's why like we have these, we stop, like on the internet, there's a multitude of let's say realities, and everyone is going down their own rabbit hole or filter bubble, and we don't even see like what's outside. That's why my first recommendation here, when you look for something, always look for whatever you want to look and for the complete opposite. So let's take a nutrition. When you look for why vegan nutrition is good, also look for why vegan nutrition is not good. So you always you get both sides and whatever you want to look for in between. But I think that's a very important, healthy way of how we can find different inputs to whatever we're looking for. But I believe that also this whole situation we experience in the world now with different realities crashing so much, this is only possible because we have given these companies so much data. And whatever the metaverse, Zuckerberg's metaverse will be up to, it will give them even more data. So they can predict almost anything. And there's also another thing that I would like to mention because it perfectly fits here. I always hear, well, I'm on Facebook, but I don't use it. Or I'm on whatever and I don't use it. Yes, you might not use it, but you are friends with someone who uses it. So you might have a similar profile, they will cross-reference and so on and so forth. So wherever we are signed on, we're giving them data, even if we don't do anything. just by the connections we have, just by the friends, by the simple, easy stuff we post, even if we don't post meaningful stuff. They still get data through all of these references. It's like a huge map of information, or like a brain of information that they have built up now. I hope that answers your question somehow.
Well, it does, but it sort of invites a follow-up question, which is more of a philosophical question, really.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go to Google and we only get what we're looking for, how do we know that our assumptions, well, I shouldn't say assumptions, but how do we know that our beliefs around surveillance and that there's a control matrix in place and that they're kind of tracking us? Like, how do we know, like, I mean, again, it's kind of a philosophical question. I'm hesitant to even ask it because I don't want to be the person who asks this question because it might indicate that I don't believe these things necessarily to be true. But philosophically, how do we know that this whole thing that we're talking about is even real? Like, how do we know that there is some sort of thing going on where they're tracking us and all of that? Like could that all be some sort of distraction?
Let me first give you a philosophical answer, and then then a technical answer.
Not to say that I believe that there's not something going on.
He likes to play devil's advocate.
But I think it opens up. I think it opens up a way of looking at things, which I think you might have a really unique perspective on. That's what I'm really interested in.
And I think these questions are super important because that's exactly, I call it the 180 degrees view. So you view in one side and then you view in the other side, 180 degrees opposite. And I think that's super important to kind of, whatever we are fed, is it true? Or is part of it true? And for me, I always say the truth lies somewhere in between. It's like a little bit of everything, I guess. But to give you a philosophical answer, we just finished our new website yesterday, and that's like the new thing. So my wife and I, we do a lot of work together, not in the IT area, but with sound healing and ecstatic dance facilitation and so on, and Akashic Records reading. So the main thing that our mission is that we believe that humanity has only one single problem. And this one single problem is that most of us have lost the connection to the higher self, the true self, to the heart. And does it really matter what anyone else thinks outside to our mission, to our purpose here on Earth? I don't think so. So we will only find any answer for our purpose within us. And yeah, that kind of makes everything that we are looking for outside at least kind of obsolete. That's one thing. And the other is like when we look for something, we will, once we connect back to the heart, and like everything we do, and we've experienced this, we've beautifully experienced this a lot of times. My main instrument I love playing is the gong, and the gong is like, you lie someone behind the gong, they just go back to the heart. And so when we start learning, going more and more back to our heart, we just know what's, maybe not what's the truth, but what's right for us, what's right for our purpose, what's right for where we want to go, or what the universe, source, however you want to call it God, has up for us. And so that's the philosophical question. That's the philosophical answer to your question. And the more technical question, in Bali, I had the chance to go to a few. The Bali community is pretty amazing. I haven't shared it yet, but my wife and my home is actually Bali, and we just, even though we're from Austria, but Bali was always in our field. And the community is pretty amazing. And we have a lot of these talks about what you're asking. And we heard that this Edward Snowden thing that came out in 2000, whenever it was, this whole NSA thing. I mean, when we see how media is working at the moment and how selective stuff is shown on the mainstream media, the question arises, why does someone that has all of this knowledge around NSA. Why did he get the possibility to spread his word so much? So the question arises: was this a planned thing, just to bring fear into people that they're controlled everywhere? And then it's like, oh, I need to put my phone away and this. And so just to create the fear before they could even like implement all of this stuff. So I'm pretty sure by now most of this has been I'm not sure if like implemented, but that data is harnessed. So they have a lot of they collect it, no matter if it's Facebook or Google. And we also need to keep in mind, we can fake anything on Instagram, we can fake anything on Facebook. But when we are on a search engine, we ask for true questions that really interest us. So we do not fake on a search engine. So the search engine is actually the most, or the clearest access to how we feel, the clearest access to what interests us. And the clearest access to how we feel might be music stores like Spotify and so on. Depending on my mood, I listen to different music. So Spotify would pretty much know every time how I feel. That's why I don't have Spotify. But it's kind of, a lot of this stuff is like hidden behind the scenes, and I think the awareness is just, and there are solutions to all of this, but having this awareness is important.
Thank you. Yeah, well said.
Wow.
I totally agree with you, and I was just curious how you would look at it, because I think for many of us, like, we're kind of in this soup of the kind of the questioning soup, where we're just kind of wondering and questioning and seeing things and questioning them and questioning them, and through that opening, there's something can rise up that just has a real sense of direction, a knowing, I would call it. And I feel like that's kind of what becomes, in a way, my navigation system through these very crazy times. And I do want to I want to get into some of the specifics. And I know Teresa's got one on the T, but to talk about like the gray area in between, like, okay, so you're on a computer, we're on a computer. Okay, so how do we then work with a computer or a phone or this technology? Like, is it about just getting rid of all of it, or are there ways to work in the gray area where we can benefit from the technology, but also maybe defend ourselves from a lot of the nefarious activities that are lurking behind it?
Yeah, as an anecdote to that, we were on a road trip this summer. This gets into a lot of.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about the ways, as you're talking, the ways in which I've changed as a result of these technologies, how I've become dependent, GPS, there's so many things, right? And how it's changed me, even though I consider myself a fairly conscious person. But we were on a road trip this summer, and Sophia, our 5-year-old daughter, had my cell phone in her hands. So there's one issue. She ended up throwing it out the window accidentally, and we were on a freeway.
Or was it?
And I said, and Stephen was like, "Oh my God." And then I said, "You know what? That's great." I was like, "Get rid of that thing." It's like, because I haven't been able to extract myself from it. And I've been wanting to for about 2 years at least. And you know what? We used Find My iPhone, and we went and picked that thing up. And I've been using it since, all cracked. And I've just been like on a mission to get rid of it. But I was thinking about that when you're talking, asking something similar to what Stephen's saying, like knowing what you know, like how you develop a more conscious relationship, because we'll get into some of the details, but it's been a real struggle for us running an online business. Like, we kind of want to get rid of these. We want to get rid of these like super invasive technologies. And yet here I am still using the cracked iPhone. So just curious about how you've approached this for yourself, maybe.
That these are the main part also my course is talking about. It's like, how can we do this little bits and pieces, setting up a VPN? So what's happening, for example, in the UK is that the internet service provider needs to record each and every page visit that you do. So with a VPN, you basically go around that and you just protect your privacy. And there are other things like, for example, national security letters in the US. So the FBI can send a national security letter to whatever US company and tell that company to track all the data. And there's a non-disclosure. So they are not allowed to state that in their privacy policy. So whatever US service you use, you basically can never know And that's why when you said knowing what I know, and I have to admit I know nothing, but I know nothing for sure. Let's put it that way. And I'm very careful and call it the bullshit radar or call it the also with conspiracy theories. I think we've been trained a lot in the last 2 years with all of these theories that go around that, yeah, some things do make sense, some things don't make sense. And some things don't make sense in combination. So it's very interesting to kind of navigate. And at the end of the day, it's always like the only truth I need to know is within me. But to get back to the question about how can we use technology, there are a lot of little things that we can do. But for example, I know the example of Samsung, where someone from Samsung told me that since the S3, 4, 5, I don't know which S they have at the moment, Samsung can basically know where the phone is anywhere in the world, turned off or on, it doesn't matter. That's why we quickly talked about that before. I have this little thing. It's from Mission Darkness. You will find it online, and it's basically a Faraday cage where you just put your phone in, you fold it twice, and this should keep the EMF away from you, because I have it very often in my backpack, and it should also like stop anything from tracking, hopefully. So I agree, it's super hard to get out of that. And there was also one of the questions, which hardware can we use? And I also have the Fairphone with an operating system that's basically a de-Googled Android system. It's from the E Foundation. And I'm looking into it's called Purism. It's a laptop, it's the Librem 14. But the thing I quickly in our talk already explained is, I mean, Apple is a $1 trillion company. So of course they have a lot of budget to create great software, to pay a lot of people, to make everything great and testing and so on. So the alternatives are not as easy to use. But I guess that's always at the brink of something new. I remember a story I did my like 8 years ago or so. I did a private pilot license at one of the airfields in Austria, and this was during the World War II. It was one of the biggest airfields where they did a lot of tests, and they were basically shooting out airplanes every day, and most of them crashed. So we are basically now in this phase of stuff is crashing, stuff is not working, because we are going into new technology. We're going into something that's into other operating systems, into different operating systems, and so on. So yeah, we have to be patient. We have to be open. We might even say, okay, some things are just not working. The question is, do we really need it? Is it just out of convenience that I have my phone with me all the time? And I'm lucky. We are living in Mexico, Tulum at the moment, and I have a very good navigation, which is good for flying, the navigation system in my head. So I look at the map once and I know how to go there. I don't need the navigation system anymore. So yes, it's just out of convenience, or can we train ourselves not to use at least some of the technology anymore?
Yeah.
And also, like the Purism 14 we've looked at, and so there is kind of a trade-off from swapping out of, say, Apple and their conveniences into things that are maybe a little less intuitive. But so you got to weigh like what's more important. But the trade-off in this case seems like it's a little learning curve, but then you'd probably be up to speed, I would imagine. So I don't think that's too bad.
Well, yeah, sorry, go ahead,
Yeah.
Martin.
It basically depends on what you need. For example, when I DJ, I have my DJ software, like the ecstatic dance DJing. I have my DJ software, which doesn't work on Linux, but Purism runs on Linux. So there are ways to run Windows Windows software on Linux. I have the Adobe suite. I cut videos, I do After Effects and that kind of stuff. So I will most probably get the Purism in the next weeks, but it's a lot of effort at the beginning just to make everything work. And I had a similar, like a year ago, 1.5 years ago, I switched away from all of these, from all of the main services. So I don't use iCloud anymore. I don't use any of the, I never used any of the Google services. So I basically set up all my own services. So I have my own, it's basically a server somewhere in a data center that only I can access, where I have all of my services that I need, where I have a Google Docs alternative, where I have my iCloud alternative, where I sync my calendar data, where I sync my contact data, where I have the video. There was also a question. I kind of keep answering questions that came just on the way. So I have a Big Blue Button, which is an alternative to Zoom. I have it set up there, but it's effort, and it takes time. And even me as an IT professional, it takes time to get into it, and yeah, a lot of effort. So it's not as easy, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the how easy it is. Like, isn't that how Apple started? Was like it just wanted to be super friendly. It's always been this like really easy to use, fun, like just easy to rope you in, right? And it's like that ease. I think about all the ways in which like how much I use a GPS or something, like how much it's just woven into my way of being. So I feel like there is so much there that it's about shifting, like getting really conscious and shifting what's important to us. And I know you said in advance of this interview, and you say in your course too, that there's a mindset shift that's really needed. I wonder if you can talk about that a little bit. And then for those watching, we are going to get really into like all the very specifics. We'll follow up on a couple of those things you just mentioned about the hardware and variety, because I know everybody's really curious. And also it does feel like we need a lot of hand holding in this area, or some help, because we have become by design, I'm sure, like dependent on these technologies, because they've been so easy, step by step. The way you describe is just step by step pulled us in, and now it's woven its way into how we interact with life in some ways. So, but I'm curious about that mindset shift that you talk about. Like, what do you see that key mindset shift being?
Mm-hmm. It's basically different values, in a way that, for example, one value is sovereignty. And obviously data sovereignty is a very important one. And there are projects that going that way. And I think, I don't have a ClearPhone myself, but a friend has a ClearPhone. And the ClearPhone offers you that you can basically share whatever data you want to share. But then they also like pay for it. So you have sovereignty over your data, and you can explicitly say, and yeah, if you're into whatever, like say some addresses, and they say, okay, these are the some addresses. So you can share your data, so you get target advertising. But you really I consciously say, I want to share this data, so I can always get the best some addresses from these three providers. But it's really about sovereignty, and about not everything is being, because that's the other thing, like the convenience also takes a lot out of our hands. And from a technical perspective, I understand why Apple has their own cloud. I understand why Apple has the ecosystem that they have, because they don't need to. Just to give a little bit of a background. So we have Apple is basically one set of computers and one operating system, which is macOS. And they're very tailor-made for each other. And then you have iOS and the iPhone. They work perfectly together. And on the other hand, you have Windows, and you have 1,000 laptops with all kind of run Windows, and you have 1,000 Android phones with different versions of Android. So it's completely scattered. And the reason why Apple is so easy to use is because they only have a very limited amount of hardware and software to maintain, and they can make these pieces like really, really good. But this also takes away a lot of the sovereignty, because we have to basically use it if we don't know our way around. So sovereignty is one big thing. Obviously, privacy, which kind of ties into that as well. My data is my data, and I can decide what's going on with my data. Super important one. Democracy. And if we look at the definition of democracy, and it's basically, it's a group of people, and they select a handful of people to be their representatives. So in a democracy, the people are from this group of people, and they are in the interest. So whatever they do is in the interest of the whole group. And if we take this definition and apply it to the world, I don't see any democracy anywhere in the world at the moment. But I think that's basically technology also needs to come in a democracy, in a way that we as people can decide what we want. And we kind of implicitly decide what we want because we go along with what comes. But this is not always, or this might not always be good for the whole community. So and that's why I think all of these beautiful developments that are coming with DAOs and the whole decentralization. And I think that's one thing that I'm very convinced of is super important for the future is also decentralization. We need to get electricity, the whole IT stuff, data storage. We need to completely decentralize that. And we see it here in Tulum, like the electricity goes down every now and then. But if everyone has their own solar panel, and the sun is shining here all the time, is having their own solar panels on top. And yeah, the electricity won't be an issue. So we need to go into this complete decentralization for like a community-driven future, because yeah, I can't go very deep into that, but I think we all know what it's about.
Yeah, for sure.
So decentralization is also, and of course democracy. So we need to create software from the people for the people. And yeah, I think these were like a few of the main. The other are in the course. So basically, the first chapter of the course is mainly about this new mindset.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty implicit in what you're saying, but in terms of why people should care about this, right? It's like, it's not just, I used to think like, I don't know, I was just very naive, I think, about a lot of this, but okay, like why, at first, before I guess maybe what I talk about now is more controversial, but I used to think like, oh, well, whatever, so they know I like summer dresses, right? But it's like, when you say that the agenda is like to keep you on the screen as much as possible, I mean, now we know today firsthand that it's about mind control, right? I mean, it's not just about maybe one day they'll come find me because they know what I've been saying about X politician or X big figure in the world, but like they have control over me. The more and more control, more I give them, the more control they have, right? So these values you're talking about, sovereignty, democracy, like decentralization, I feel like that resonates across all areas of life these days from what we've been shown the past couple of years.
Totally agree on that. Yeah. And it's basically all of these values. It's nothing new in these values that are present in the course. But I think it's important, like, because the whole course is based on these values. It's just important to bring them up. And nothing is a new invention. It's how it actually should be and how it maybe was for a long time, and yeah, where we can go again.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should all, if any of us get ads for summer dresses, we should post them in the Ownstream network. Since we've both mentioned
we talked about summer dresses a lot.
Let's
say summer dresses again and see how many.
Also, Lisa makes a really funny, but not so funny, but poignant question. Are they watching us on YouTube? And might be, and if so,
probably
say hi.
And Zoom.
But let's get into some specifics now. You want to kind of begin with like the phone topic?
Yeah.
Is that how I'm reading that?
Yeah. Well, let's start there. We have so many different topics to cover, so we can. And there's already more questions coming into the chat, so
a lot in the
we'll
chat.
come back. We'll come to those too.
But yeah, like in terms of the cell phone, Martin, how do you handle that? What do you think is the best setup for somebody?
It's interesting because here where I'm now, for some reason, the phone or the SIM, the data is not really working most of the time. So I kind of naturally don't use it. So that's obviously one thing. If you're in a space where it's not working, you just don't use it. But I think there are different facets to it. And one is about a year ago, I did on Bali, I did an amazing detox where they basically were examining the blood. So they were looking through the microscope at the blood, which I like the first time ever I've seen that. And then there's something called the rouleau effect, which is basically all these red blood cells kind of clogging up together. And this is happening through a lot of EMF exposure and a lot of working with the phone. So back then, I mean, when you see it in your own blood, you know it's like, okay, it's really happening. And I think we can raise our vibration enough so nothing of that is concerning us. But the question is, how often and how long can we have our vibration that high? And I personally can't, so I just get off the phone. But I'm practicing. So that's one of the, when you see that in your own blood. And this whole detox was 1.5 months, and then they were checking the blood again, and the blood takes 30 days to renew. And after 1.5 months, I could already see in my blood that it has improved a lot, because that there were two things that I did. One thing was I turned off all the wireless LAN and used cables everywhere, and I minimized my phone usage. And so also, like, simply from the health perspective, and there have been studies recently coming out that also with a lot of exposure to radiation, especially in city areas. Yeah, also the recuperation or the recovery from illnesses, and this study was specifically about COVID, it has an influence, because like there's so much bombarding our system that our system has to, it's running it's under electricity all the time, basically, which is not good, obviously. And so one thing is really like getting off the phone. And I have the feeling, for me, I don't really need the phone. And there's on the iPhone, there is screen time. I also explained it in the course. So you just turn on your screen time, and I think it's when you see like how many hours, like we're not spending minutes per day on our phone, we're spending hours. And I can't remember the average, but it's somewhere between 3 and 5 hours a day on the phone, which is when you think about, oh, no, I'm just for a few minutes here, a few minutes there. No, it sums up. So it's a lot of time, which is also like an awareness thing. And just become aware of how much time you spend on your phone. And or like making certain rules for yourself or certain guidelines. I don't use my phone before 9 o'clock in the morning, before I do like my daily practice, whatever it is, meditation, yoga, qigong. And I don't use my phone after 8 o'clock. And I'm setting these guidelines. Sometimes I have a hard time also like holding them, but these are just little things to help us getting away more and more from the phone. And what also helps, there is, I'm pretty sure you most of you have heard of the HeartMath Institute, with this little clip where they measure your heart rate variability. And I did a workshop a year ago where we had these thingies, and we were all sitting in a circle. We had our clip on our ear, and we got into the green area. So like heart rate variability is good. As soon as a notification came in, you could see, boop, it's dropping. So our coherence, like our heart with the coherence of our whole system, every time we get a notification, it drops. So I just turned off all the notifications. I have this silent mode, or this night mode, all day long. So I can consciously decide, okay, now I want to look at my phone and I want to see if anything came or not. And I agree, it depends on what job you have. If you have a job where you get phone calls like 10 times a day, you can't do that. But I'm pretty sure that's not the majority, that we get like 10, 15 phone calls every day. Yeah.
We got a notification right when you were saying that. We both laughed. It popped right on the screen. No, I mean, I can't tell you how often I use the word scattered to talk about how I feel or and I know it's a huge part. I don't even want to tell you what the screen time report tells me every day, and it's in the window that you said, 3 to 5 hours. And I get this kind of pain every time I see that, and yet I feel this entanglement that's so hard to change. So I love how you told me right before we came on, Martin showed us this Faraday bag the first time. He said, yeah, I put it in there and then I don't really have to deal with it for a long time. And when I have the same exact Faraday bag and I'll put it in, I'll be like, oh, one more message, and I'll like pull it out and I'll put it back in, and then I'm lost. It's like an hour went by. So I'm in the zone of people that you're talking about here. But in terms of hardware, because we got a lot of questions about that, you've mentioned a couple phones already. We got a couple questions about like, are privacy smartphones better, like the Brax phone, de-Googled phone, clear phones, light phones? You've talked a little bit about that, but can you talk about how to approach that? Like, are those better than regular old smartphones? Like, how do you approach changes in this area?
So yeah, they say that they are better. So that's the marketing thing. And maybe I'll quickly, I have a checklist, and I apply this checklist every time I buy a service. And service can be anything. It can be a program, a software, an online service, or a hardware. So let me quickly just see the checklist. Let me quickly open that. It's also in the course, this checklist in chapter 3. And that might also be an interesting one. The first, if you want to check out the course, the first 5 sections are free. And this checklist is it's in the 3rd section, so you get the checklist for free. And what's important about, like, how can we be sure that they're really private? And one thing, and the first on my checklist, is open source. Open source basically means like every software we have is a program that's written in whatever computer language, so in whatever programming language. And open source simply means that the way, or the source code for all of these programs is available online. So you can actually check, you can see what is really written. So you can check the source code. And Apple, Facebook, Android, like Google, they can say what they want. If I can't check the source code, I can never make sure if that's really the case. And when you look at the contracts Apple has with other contractors, there has been a huge thing about that. I mean, these contracts are so tight. They're not allowed to say like anything, and they have huge fines and so on. So with contracts, they're kind of binding everyone so strong that no one is saying anything. So it's just a thing to keep in mind. And so open source is number 1 on my list. If it's an open source operating system or software, for example, we all know open source tools like Firefox is open source. Then there are some de-Googled Android platforms like the eFoundation. That's open source. Then we have the base of the Chrome browser, which is also used in the Brave browser. I cannot recommend using the Chrome browser, especially not if you're signed in with your Gmail account, because then basically anything you do, anything you search, anything is tracked. Just check out the privacy policy. And there was even like they're checking the invoices you have in your inbox. I don't know if that's still the case, but for a while this was the case. So yeah, that's where we basically also have to, like, people need to say no. That's when we kind of go back to democracy. Like, we need to say no to these things. Then Linux is an operating system. I quickly explain because I know that some people don't know Linux. So we have Windows as an operating system, which is basically like it's the base system that runs on your computer. So we have Windows, we have macOS, and we have Linux. And for Linux, we have a lot of different distributions. It's called. So we have Ubuntu. We have what's coming with the Librem laptop is PureOS or Cubes, and so on. There are so many distributions for different, some are for the server, some are for the desktop, and most of them, or almost all of them, are open source. So that's also, and there's a big community behind this. There are people behind it that you can most probably, even reach out to and talk to. So that's one big thing, open source software. And let me quickly check what else. Yep. So when I go for service, also encryption is a big thing. And there are different kinds of encryptions, and I also explain them. I keep referencing the course because I have like the extended information is always in the course. There are different types of encryption. And when Apple says, well, everything is encrypted, then this sounds good. But the question is, how is it encrypted? There are different ways of encryption. And we hear, like recently, we hear about a lot about end-to-end encryption. And that for the sake of fighting terrorism and other things, they want to make end-to-end encryption basically illegal. And I mean, I remember there was a terrorist attack in Vienna, my hometown, a little bit more than a year ago. So there was the terrorist attack, and a few days later, the government was proposing a new law, which basically makes end-to-end encryption, which we now have on WhatsApp and Signal, which makes it illegal. And I was like, okay, I don't have the resources that the terrorists have, but I want to see if I can find an alternative that's still end-to-end encrypted that I can completely run myself. And within a day, I had this alternative set up. So I'm pretty sure that the terrorists, with much more funding, much more money, can set this up within a day. So this whole story about we need that to fight terrorism is just bullshit, because they can just use another platform. And that's what brings me back to what I shared at the beginning. The most important thing is bring ourselves back to the heart and helping people bring them back to the heart. Because like once everyone is in the heart space, everything else will, I don't want to say fall into place, but rise into place. So everything else, once we understand that by hurting someone else or by exploiting nature, we ultimately hurt ourselves. Like once we feel that, once we know that, by connecting back to our heart, like everything else will rise into place anyway. So I think that's a shift in consciousness and raising consciousness, which is like, I guess my purpose here on Earth is the most important thing.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I have another track forming, but I think we'll avoid that for now. There's a really good question in the chat from Nancy related to this topic. Now that we're talking about phones, but she says, if our cell phone is on airplane mode, can we be heard? Can we be heard if it's turned off? Maybe speak a little bit about airplane mode and what protection that provides.
So if you go on airplane mode on an iPhone, you will still see that the GPS is working. So on airplane mode, there is
hello.
which is kind of interesting because but I think it's kind of different because when I'm in and they say always when you're in an airplane, you need to put it on airplane mode. But if it's still communicating, or it still can communicate with the GPS, what's the point? But regarding this, I mean, there have been apps, and the Facebook app has been accused of that they're actively listening. So what Apple introduced now is you have this little green dot for your camera has been used, and this little orange dot for your microphone has been used. So you at least know which apps are using your periphery, like the phone and the camera and the microphone. But I don't know what Apple themselves is doing. And we cannot know because the software that they have is not open source. That's why I put it in my bag, and I also don't have it on my table. I put it away, and I keep getting this question of, well, I've been talking with a friend about some addresses, and suddenly I get some addresses offered everywhere. And I have two explanations, because I think it's and it's also part of the filter bubble. Once we favor it a certain direction, we kind of tend to focus on what's confirming this direction. And I think it's also like an example of what happened in the last 2 years. Like, an amount of people went into one direction and the other amount of people went into the other direction in what they believe. And it's super hard to convince either of them of the other direction, because that's what they believed in the last 1.5 years. So you basically, you're turning the whole worldview upside down, and they would need to admit that they might have been wrong the last 1.5 years for whatever direction. To get back to the phone, and to the some addresses, because they say, well, the phone must be listening to me because I've been talking about some addresses and now I get some addresses. But what might also be is Facebook, for example, the Facebook app is tracking where you are. And when a friend is there with you, they might correlate the location where both of you are. And when your friend is interested in some addresses, so you might be as well. So they might not be listening, but they still can correlate the data because you have been together, and they know that through the GPS location. So there is a lot of different options, what might be and what could be. And I think it's important to keep an open mind and not say, well, they're for sure listening to what I'm saying, which might be the case, but I cannot confirm it because I simply don't have the evidence to confirm it.
Sure.
And if you keep a smartphone and you switch all of those off, I recently did that, just switched off that none of the apps could use my camera, my whatever. Like you're still saying basically we don't know what Apple's doing with it. Like even if I say, oh, Facebook can't, and then who Apple's sharing it with, right? We don't really know. Like even if we check all those things.
Exactly. And the easiest way to not allow Facebook to listen anymore is just to deinstall the app. So
someone asked that. Stephen has another question about phones, but since you mentioned that, someone asked ahead, how do I make sure I'm completely rid of Facebook, basically, WhatsApp? Like, how do I make sure is it just you deinstall the app? And you said earlier, like, you got to get rid of your profile too, right? Like, how do you make sure you're out of Facebook? Somebody asked that ahead of time.
Yeah, good question.
Honestly, I think once you signed up for Facebook, you will never 100% get out again for various reasons. And even with this whole data protection stuff, which is good, like the GDPR and everything. But what every company is doing is they create backups, obviously, of their system. So you might not be in their system, in the current system anymore, but you are in all the backups that they made and that they keep while you've been signed up to that system. And that what sometimes happens is that if something goes wrong, they need to restore a backup, and then suddenly your account is back, and you're like, what happened? So this can also happen. So I guess they can never make sure that all of the thousands of backups that they have, that there is no data of you anymore. It's just impossible. It is possible, but the effort that they would need to put into cleaning your data out of the backups, I guess no company will do that because there's no benefit for them in that. And so what I also always recommend is when you use a service, ask yourself, do I really need it? And then ask yourself, do you really need it? And then ask yourself, do I really need it? And then obviously, I mean, we all check the privacy policy, but it does make sense to quickly go through the privacy policy. and see what data they're actually collecting, and then ask again, is it worth it? And then like really only sign up to what you really need. I think that's an important one. And if you want to try something, just I also like I talk about what email addresses do we need, and that's also part of the question. So maybe we can quickly steer into the email area. I have an email address for my crypto stuff, which I don't use anywhere else. I have an email address for my private stuff. I have an email address maybe for my business stuff. And then I have a throwaway email address. So you can sign up for any newsletter, anything. And once you get a lot of spam on that email, you just throw it away and you create a new one. So it does make sense to have different email addresses for different use cases. And but how to really get rid of that is I left WhatsApp about a year ago. A lot has happened about a year ago. But I left WhatsApp about a year ago, and you just installing the app doesn't do anything. So you need to delete your account, and that's very important. So you need to delete your account, and I'm not sure if what happens with your data, because you basically uploaded all your contacts and you've been syncing all your contacts with WhatsApp all the time. And if you have to use WhatsApp, it might make sense to not sync your contacts. So Facebook doesn't have all of these connections. Then you would need to, it's a little bit tedious because you need to copy the number from your contacts and then start on WhatsApp a chat like this, but at least you don't need to upload all the contacts this way. So really like deleting the account is important, and deinstalling the apps. And normally on iPhone, when you deinstall an app, also all the data is deleted. But what I do and what I can recommend is, like, let's say once a year or once every 2 years, completely wipe the phone. Because when you wipe the phone, you can be sure like there is nothing, because it's basically resetting everything, and you need to wipe it so all the data is gone. And then then you don't restore your backup, but you install only what you really need, because when you restore your backup, you again have all the data on it. And I do the same with my laptop.
Is that something that wiping clean? Is that something you'll cover either on your course or in the two sessions we're going to do in the Ownstream network? That sounds like something that would really benefit from having someone walk you through it.
Mm-hmm. It depends. So I recommend it in my course, but the thing is, it's different it's very, very specific, because everyone has different apps installed. Everyone has different computer, different operating system. But that's actually a good because there's like a checklist you can go through before you reset your computer, before you format your computer. And what I can recommend to everyone, that's another recommendation, is always set the passcode on your phone. That's a super, super important one. Because once you set a passcode, for example, on an iPhone, all the data you have on the phone will be encrypted. That's a super important one. On Android, there is an extra in the settings where you just check that you want to have your data encrypted. That's super important. And on macOS, there's something called file vault, and it's not enabled by default, but you can turn it on. And then on the Mac also your data is encrypted. But this only helps you like when someone gets physical access to your data. So when someone steals your phone, your laptop, and so on, they cannot access your data because it's encrypted.
Gotcha.
So that's an important one. That's also in the course, and also a big recommendation. There's a whole section on hard disk encryption. That's basically what it is, and backups. Because backups are super important, underestimated thing. You throw your phone out of the window, or you trash your laptop, and you basically want to have. What happened to me on Bali is because there's a lot of humidity, from 1 second to the other. It was a 1-year-old MacBook Pro for, I don't know, 3,000 euros. So it was not a super cheap thing. And from 1 second to the other, it blanked. And basically, like, the humidity killed it. And I keep doing regular backups and stuff, because then like you're happy that you have these backups. So backup is also a big topic I'm talking about in the course.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh gosh, there's so many more questions.
This one though I think is really relevant.
Yeah,
I know a lot of. I'm just looking at the people in the
yeah,
chat,
there's some good
and
ones
you
in the
mentioned
chat.
crypto. Like,
Mhm.
I'm into crypto. A lot of people that are in the Ownstream community are interested in crypto. One thing that happens in crypto, if you really want to be safe on some of these platforms, particularly a centralized exchange and otherwise, there's the requirement for two-factor authorization, which often implicates a phone. How do you handle two-factor authorization? What's the safest way to go about that, perhaps without a cell phone?
Mhm. There are different ways of doing this two-factor authentication, and it's basically email, which is not safe because like email can be intercepted, and it's not encrypted most of the time. Some exchanges, for example, Kraken, you can add your public key for encryption. So they send you encrypted emails so no one can read them in between. But I've only seen that on Kraken so far. So email is in general. I have a whole section just on email in the course, because it's like it's a super unsafe protocol from the 1990s. So no one back then thought about encryption and privacy and metadata encryption, all that kind of stuff. It's just an old protocol. It's like the cars from the 1990s. They use a lot more fuel than the cars nowadays. So email is not secure. SMS is also not secure, because there is something called SMS hijacking, where someone can get basically access to your SIM card, and then the messages, the short messages, are sent to them because they've basically hijacked your SIM card. So apps, two-factor authentication apps are the most safest, one of the most safest ones. There's also another one which is a USB dongle, which gives you and for example, the Librem laptop is using that. So you have an extra USB dongle, and through that USB dongle, it can verify the data on your computer. And there are certain services. And for example, Bitwarden is one service, and Bitwarden is open source. And if you want to use it with two-factor authentication, you pay a little bit. You pay, I don't know, like $30 a year or something. So it's basically nothing. But also one important thing, if you use something open source, always consider donating. That's how they live. So I have like my services, and I kind of keep donating to all of these services, because they don't sell your data, and they don't have big companies in their back. So donating is a very important one. So Bitwarden works. You can also self-host it. That's another thing. Self-hosting basically means you can either use the server that they use on their servers, or you can download the server and run it on your own server. So Bitwarden you can run on your own server. And it's end-to-end encrypted, and it's basically it allows you to store passwords, and it allows you to do two-factor authentication. And now to get to your question, it allows you to do it on your phone and on your laptop. So even if you lose your phone, you can still do it on your laptop, and you can also do it in the web browser. So for me, it's important I've like used services that I can basically also use. There's one service which I haven't found an alternative or an easy alternative yet, where I need to go on the phone, but the rest I can just do it on my laptop as well.
There's some questions in the chat. I think it was from earlier when you were talking about the blood exam that you did, but just about the harm of the technologies, and asking basically like, from a physical health perspective, is using a cell phone significantly more problematic than using a laptop, or are they equally problematic? Just curious, like do you keep your laptop, and we have Faraday bags for our laptop too. Are you as rigorous about that as well?
I normally turn off I turn off Bluetooth, and I turn off the Wi-Fi on my laptop. So I only use the LAN cable, and with that, I'm at least not sitting in the receiver or in the sender. So And with the phone, I mean, I have a USB-C to Ethernet adapter, and that works on the Fairphone as well. So I could have the Fairphone on the LAN cable, but obviously I'm not running around with the LAN cable on the Fairphone. But that's also, it's possible to use cables with the phone if you have to use it, but it's not super convenient, I have to admit. But yeah, I think getting out of the direct receiver, direct sender, because also when we're super close to the router, it's worse than when we're further away. So not having like the antenna and everything working in your computer is a good one. And for the Librem laptop, because we've talked about it before, you have hardware switches, so you can switch off the Wi-Fi. You can switch off the microphone. It's a hardware switch. It really kills the connection. So, and that way you can be sure that the microphone is not listening, or that the Wi-Fi is not on.
Yeah. I know you talked about a couple different options for laptops, like the Librem and the Purism. Is that the same?
Yeah.
It's the same laptop, right? It's a version.
Yes. Yeah. It's the Purism is basically Apple, and MacBook Pro is Librem. So
It's
that's
the type.
it's the company at the top.
And maybe, I don't know if that's something, I know some people have been talking about that in the community. We were looking at it as well, and I know there's also a kind of a high price point to it. So I don't know if there's other alternative models, but people were discussing that. Is that the kind of thing you might be, I'm not going to get into details on that now, but those kind of things you might be able to walk people through in a workshop, Martin, like making a switch like that? Because I know you were talking about earlier how it's easy. Apple's easy, right? They made it really easy, and these switches are a little bit harder, but we won't get into too many details on that now. But I imagine that might be the kind of thing you could cover.
Yes, and it's like very personal,
Yes.
or very specific, because it depends on what you need. If you're using Office, Microsoft Office, you can switch to Open Office. And if you're browsing the internet, then you need a browser where you can use Firefox. So if these are the main two things that you need, you don't need a high-priced laptop, you don't need like super funky hardware. You can go with the easy stuff, and you can use almost any operating system. But if you're like cutting videos, and if you're DJing, and if you're doing lots of other stuff, then it might not be so easy. And I'm also important, like I'm still on my path as well. I'm trying to figure this out as I go. And this course that I created came out of, okay, I've been looking at all of these different issues around privacy that we have, and then I started creating this course. So it's for me also like learning by doing kind of thing.
Sure.
Of course, with the 20 years of IT background, it's a little bit easier to try certain things. But it's I guess we're all on our way.
Yeah. Somebody had asked, what steps do I need to take every time I launch my computer to retain the most privacy and freedom? Can you walk us through that? Like someone says, like, using a VPN, what browser they're using. Like, do you have like when you're thinking about launching your computer, like what are the first 5 things you would do, or something like that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me quickly go back to the course as well, because I have like in the sections I'm explaining step by step what you can do, and it's basically so the first thing I recommend is like having a malware scanner. And the malware scanner is like it's like a detox, because we can have the best diet for our body, whatever the diet is. If we don't detox before, if we don't get rid of all the old stuff, the diet won't be as beneficial as it could be with the detox upfront. So it's very important to get rid of all like the viruses and unneeded, unwanted data. So a malware scanner is like the first thing to install and to have running all the time. And most of them are like most of these services are from the beginning, like when you turn on your computer, and when you want to make really sure that it's not accessing the internet before you have all of that running, just don't connect it to the internet before. Just have your cable off, and once everything is up and you see everything is running, then put your cable in. So a malware scanner is important. And let me see what else I have here. Firewall. obviously. So you can Apple. So OS X, for example, does have a firewall, but it's not on by default, and it's by far not sufficient. And I have a few firewall alternatives that I'm also explaining in the course. Because a firewall is basically it's blocking traffic from the outside, internet traffic from the outside to come to our computer, but it should also block traffic going from the computer to the outside. Because if a hacker for some reason could install, or if we click the wrong link or something, and they could install a software on our computer, which then needs to access from our computer the outside, our firewall could block that if we have a proper firewall. The Mac firewall, unfortunately, doesn't do that. And it's interesting because one of the best Mac firewalls is from an Austrian, from a company in Vienna. So I was happy about that. Yeah, VPN, of course, also makes sense. And VPN is kind of always like, oh, I want to watch stuff on whatever platform that I'm not allowed to in my country where I currently am. But that's not what it's about. It's really about privacy. It's about the internet service provider not spying and sniffing on all our data. And because they basically have to I can quickly explain that. It's a little more technical, but the URL that we type in, the computers don't find each other through that URL. So there is something called a name server, and some of you might have heard of the name server. So with the URL, my computer is going to the name server to get the IP address, and through the IP address, we can then connect to the other computer. But we need to ask for anything we do, we need to ask the name server. So whoever operates the name server, whoever has the name server knows all of our requests we're doing. So that's an important thing. And once we go through a VPN, and either they have the name servers or we use just an open name server somewhere else, then we can go around that. But most VPNs have their own name server where they don't track anything. So VPN is also a good thing. And having the cable not plugged in, or the Wi-Fi turned off until everything is actually really started. And for example, since my phone is anyway most of the time on flight mode, when I turn the phone on, it's again on flight mode. So I can make sure everything is up and running before I actually connect it, which at the moment, luckily, anyway, doesn't really work.
Martin, for those who don't know, what is a VPN? I mean, I've used it before, but what is that? What is that? What does it stand for?
Okay, so it's called virtual private network.
Huh.
And what's basically happening is that with my computer, what I normally do is my computer connects to the router, and the router is connecting to the internet service provider, and then the internet service provider is making the requests to the rest of the world. But what the VPN is doing is that my computer is having a tunnel. That's why it's the private tunnel to a server somewhere in the world. And that's why when you have a VPN service, you can select in the US, in Europe, or whatever. So my computer is through a private tunnel that's encrypted, where no one else can read what's going on inside, connecting to one of the servers of the VPN provider in Europe. So to whoever is outside, he thinks that I'm connecting from Europe, and there are services, online services, where you can, when you search for what is my IP address, it will show you normally your local IP address that you have here. But once you go through a VPN, it will show you the IP address of the server that you're connected to. So to the outside world, you are hiding your location, you're hiding your IP address, and it's not also an important one. I also mentioned, of course, there is no silver bullet thing. So there is no one thing. And you go, oh, VPN, that sounds very, very privacy respecting. Yes, but it's only part of it, because I used a VPN yesterday, and I needed to, for whatever reason, I needed to look something on a Google website. And they knew that I was in Mexico. So they have the ways through the browser and through through the time zone and so on, because like your computer, there are different ways to kind of connect the data and to still find where you are.
Yeah, I know Stephen has a few maybe rapid fire, we'll see, software questions that to try to ask you. And then we wanted to talk a little bit about kids and technology because that's a big area of questions that came up.
One
Yeah,
more thing
go ahead.
regarding VPN, because I think it's super important, and I mentioned it at least 10 times in the course. Never ever use a free VPN, because what the free VPN is doing, they are still selling your data. That's basically their business model. And it's $100 a year, 150. It's definitely worth the money. And that's like, that's a super important one. Never use a free VPN. They're not reliable and they're not private. So if better use no VPN than using a free VPN.
So, Martin, in terms of email, what are the most secure email providers? We've heard a lot about Proton Mail, Tutanota. Would those be in the top echelon of email services to use? And which ones should we definitely stay away from?
So I would personally stay away from big tech, Gmail, Outlook, you name them. But not because of the email, but because of big tech. So it's email. The problem with email is that it's in general an insecure protocol, as I briefly mentioned before. So it's like, and you can have Proton Mail, and but the problem is if you send me a Proton Mail, an email through Proton Mail to my Proton Mail account, this is secure, this is all good. But if I then forward to Theresa's Gmail account, then it's like it's unencrypted and Google can read it again. So it's like the whole email ecosystem is not secure. It's like it's pretty similar what we also need to keep in mind about WhatsApp. They claim that what they do is end-to-end encryption. And I say they claim because we cannot verify it. So they claim they're using end-to-end encryption, but the thing is, once you do a backup to iCloud, the data is unencrypted. So it's like, it's important to have systems, and the new systems that are emerging now. And I was at a beautiful event called a Tribalize event here in Tulum 3 weeks ago, where all of these new technologies are emerging, and they're building beautiful communities where they have the community vibe, and they're building places where you can go to, and they also use technologies to their advantage, amazing technologies, like by the people, for the people, and like all encrypted, so no one can basically intercept it. So we need systems that, as a system, are secure. That's a super important one. So email, yeah, it's hard to recommend anything when it comes to email, because the protocol itself is insecure.
So be aware of what you're sharing on email.
Exactly.
Someone asked about Signal. Like, is there a platform that's really secure? Like, what about Signal?
Signal, and I've written an article about when this whole like privacy thing with WhatsApp came up. I wrote an article, and I'm happy to share the article as well, so you can share it with the community.
Yeah, thank you.
About why people are switching away from WhatsApp. And basically back then what they tried is they tried to weaken their privacy policy so much, and then they got a big drawback from the community, and a lot of people started switching. And I remember in January, I was texting my friends and say, I'm leaving WhatsApp, and most of them were like, yeah, I'm staying. It's too convenient. But 2 months later, when I said, because I gave it like a month or two to just sink in. 2 months later, I was writing everyone again and say, I'm finally doing my switch now. And everyone was like, yeah, no worries. I'm on Telegram, I'm on Signal, I'm on everywhere. So I was like, it might take time, but it's beautiful that people are waking up.
And would you say Signal's the most secure of those kind of messaging platforms?
The thing is, they claim to be secure, but also to go back to the article. Sorry, I didn't finish my thought on the article. There is also reference to Signal being sponsored basically by some US companies to to again exploit our data. But yeah, there are still some alternatives. One alternative that I think is even like completely open source, I would need to check that again, is something called Session. And so the chat app is called Session. And it's an Australian blockchain crypto company. And when I say Australia, most would be like, oh, Australia, for sure not. But the thing is that they say they create the system implicitly uncrackable. And also with uncrackable, I need to put this into uncrackable. And I recently had this discussion about encryption. Uncrackable means that computers are not quick enough yet. So if I have a password that's long enough, and I have a whole section on passwords, which is another big thing in the course, which is long enough, just takes a long time. It takes 500 million years to crack, which doesn't mean it's practically uncrackable. It's theoretically uncrackable, but it's practically uncrackable. So Session claims to be secure, but they're still like in the infancy. So they have some issues, but I think they're doing a really good job, and the way that they are encrypting the messages, and that they're using a completely decentralized node system to deliver the messages. That's a good one. And another service, the one that I set up once when they wanted to make the end-to-end encryption illegal, it was called Matrix. So the Matrix is the server, the protocol is called Matrix, and element.io is the chat app. So you could set this up. I could set this up on one of my servers, and we could all connect to that. So we have one server where that's not hosted or not run by any of the big tech companies. But it's talking about the filter bubble we talked at the very beginning. That's one of the things. When you want to control a story, you always control both sides. So you control the fear-making side, and you control the other side. You basically control both ends of the fear-making. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Our signal is super secure, but you also control the signal is not secure. So at the end of the day, you have no clue what's really going on.
Yeah, Kavita asked in the chat, and she asked this ahead of time too, how can we be sure that the software, hardware companies and products we know to be trustworthy today are still trustworthy a week, month, or year later? She was asked about, should we be doing inventories, like regularly checking that they haven't been purchased by other companies, or, I mean, just like the signal, like it's like, how do you really know? In the end, it seems like you just have to come back to what feels right for you. I feel like as I'm listening to you, so I'm like, okay, I feel like I want to take a deep breath, because I know it's like it can be overwhelming. It's overwhelming for me. And someone said in the chat, I identify Aurora, like it's overwhelming because I know that I'm running an online business, and I'm not going to get off completely, but it can be really overwhelming. So it's like how to just continually approach this with some consciousness, but also lightness, because it could be a shifting landscape too, right? It's like, okay, WhatsApp is safe one day, it's not. Go to Signal, but Signal's being pushed by this company, or I don't know if you have any advice around like ongoing monitoring, or like just checking in with yourself as you go along, or that kind of thing, because since things are always changing. But
I think I mean, I know it was hard the last 2 years, but and I know that all of these online things have given us amazing opportunities to stay in touch and to communicate. But I think one way to approach this is also to, again, value direct communication. So we leave our phones at home, we meet with friends, and we just talk to them in person if they're around. That's obviously like one thing, but I know, and I do understand that, like with the whole online thing, it's not as easily possible. And I mean, WhatsApp is the best example. WhatsApp was an amazing app. They had a lot of users, and suddenly it's been bought by Facebook. And you never know who is bought by whom next. It's just happening, because a lot are in for the money, and they at some point lose their their motives or the why they really went in. But it is a changing landscape, and I guess it will always be like that. And I guess that's natural, because like if I look at the trees every day, they are different, and they're beautiful. So it's a natural process.
That's good to remember. It's
And
good to
evolving,
remember
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one thing to say. Well, I don't know. Go ahead to that. So let's talk about kids and technology.
Yes.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. It would be great to see, you've mentioned a number on this recording, and I could just go back as well, but like a list of the open sourced technologies in these different
Mhm.
areas, because if
Mhm.
you happen to have that, because I feel like that's a really good place to start, like you said earlier, like whether it's
Mhm.
buying a new laptop or a phone, or even the fact that you mentioned Firefox today, to me, like I've been using Firefox because I just got rid of Chrome one day, and Firefox was the other one on my screen, but I was like, is this good? I don't know. So it's just knowing that even that is a place to start feels a little less overwhelming to me.
It's and I said I keep referencing the course. I have a whole section on which browsers to use, and
Mhm.
also for the browser privacy extensions. So, for example, that the cookies are deleted once you close the tab, or that
Yeah.
certain um, um, uh, websites that are displaying ads and so on cannot display the ads because they're blocked by other add-ons. So I have a whole list of add-ons in the course, and I have a whole list of alternatives. Let me quickly. Yeah, I can. It's like it's not the full picture that you will get, because I will basically only I can share the checklist. That's part of the paid version of the course, but I can share the checklist. And if you want to dive deeper into it, you can do the course. But this at least lists for like the whole Google Docs, the alternatives for video platforms and so on. So it lists a lot of alternatives that we can use, and I'm happy to share that.
That'd be
Yeah,
great. I
that'd be
think
great.
we would
Mm.
share that before your first session in the community, which is I guess the
Mm.
19th, so people can
Mm.
see that. Maybe that'll prompt some other discussion. Because yeah,
Perfect.
I
Yeah.
had all kinds of questions about Brave and Firefox, but maybe we'll save that because I do. We're running out of time a little bit,
Yep.
and the kids stuff. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously really super prescient for Teresa and I because we have a 5, 6, almost a 6-year-old. We do a lot of driving with her. It's like she's in cars for a long time just because we live very remotely, which is
Mm.
great. But then there's these long drives, and there are times where it's really she really wants the screen, and having her have something there that she can interact with and learn from, hopefully, is great. But so I'll start with this one. Is this our question?
I wrote that question.
I thought it was. I was like,
We have a
wait a second, this person's exact same
we have a
scenario
few kids' questions on here actually, but curious he's going to read the question I wrote, but how you approach this. I know you have a whole module on this in your course too, but how you approach it generally, because we had a few questions. We won't be able to ask them all from parents who are kind of struggling with different things. So you want to?
Yes, this anonymous person
This
writes,
was me.
my
Yeah.
daughter loves using the screen, and because she loves it and we parents are on the screen a lot for online meetings and our business, we haven't wanted to draw a hard boundary around it, but we also don't feel good about her being on the screen a lot or watching a lot of media we haven't screened ourselves.
Yeah.
What steps do you recommend we take to ensure her privacy and reduce the influence of the puppeteers on her development, and to help her develop a healthy relationship to technology in these times?
Um, I have, as you already mentioned, Teresa, I have a whole section, and that's part of the first 5 free sections. So anyone can look into that. And I don't use the F word anywhere in my course, except in that part, because it's basically the way we use technology is we're like fucking up a whole generation in a way that, for example, taking kids. And there's a recommendation. The recommendation actually came from the WHO. So you can have your own. You can have your own thoughts about that. But to me, it kind of made sense when I tuned in. So it's under the age of 2, no screen time at all. and it's for the development of the kid. Kids need to be bored in order to create attention. So, but what happens, and I have to say I cannot talk out of experience because I have no kids, but I see it with friends around. Their 1.5-year-old kid is crying, screaming, whatever. What do they get? A phone with a YouTube video showing whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's neither educational nor they need to be bored in order to create this attention. And I mean, attention deficit is a big issue that we face in our society. But a few recommendations that I heard, and I cannot give because I will only give them if I would have to experience myself. So I can only say I heard them. Is first and foremost for yourself to have the awareness, and I think you have the awareness, and then also go into a conversation with the kids, because like and I'm pretty sure we've all experienced that, and I have experienced that having once been a kid myself, where the mom says, no, you're not allowed to do that. And then I ask the mom, but why? And what is her answer? Because I say so. but it's a lot easier when you explain to kids why they shouldn't use that. And this can be different explanations, and you can say whatever, mom and daddy are working on that, and that's why they need to use that. But we also have our boundaries. We do this, and that. We don't have the phone underneath our pillow. We don't have the phone in our bedroom. We don't use the phone in our living room. We only have it in our office. And so really also for the parents having these boundaries, so the kids can, because the kids are basically learning from the parents, right? So the kids can also learn, I only have my phone in certain rooms, in certain areas. And I'm only using it for a certain amount of time because it's not good for my health. I'm just wasting time, and so on. So it's like really this healthy conversation with the kids around technology, I think is super important. And yeah, I also sometimes go on YouTube and just watch the trailers of the action movies of the year, just because like I know it's all it's for the mind. It doesn't give me anything, but sometimes you just need that. But when you consciously go into that and you say, now I do it because I just want to do it. It's different than having like this addiction to it. And this topic, this section is talking about addiction and setting boundaries, and then also about children and how to handle that with children. And if you give the children your phone, and that was just when you shared that we're driving along, and I can remember when I was a kid, my father came from the countryside, so we had to go there for 3 hours. And after being there like 10 times, I could exactly say when is which stone coming along the way. Yeah. So the question is always, how did we do it 20 years ago? Yeah. We had no phone. We couldn't give the kids the phone. And so also like changing our mindset, like really using it for professional use or if for educational use. If you have a good app, Duolingo, for example, you want to learn a language, then that might be a thing to go with. But watching YouTube videos of the best 10 pranks of the year of whatever it's just, there is no value in it. And I think it's also, people keep asking me why I left Facebook. And one reason was, besides the privacy, was also the energy. And there's also the Facebook movie, and Facebook was created so people can vote on the boob size of their classmates. And I was like, I mean, what energy is going into that system? It's like, I mean, do you want to be part of that or not? It's everyone's decision. But just didn't want to be in that energy anymore. And I guess that's part of the waking up process, that this is not the energy we want to be in anymore.
Yep.
Yeah, it feels
Did
like,
this somehow answer your question?
Yeah.
oh no, it did.
Okay.
We're just sitting here thinking, sitting with this, because I feel like for anyone who's overwhelmed, like I do feel like it's just, there's certain things I know for myself, I just feel called toward. Like it's very clear, like I haven't used Facebook in a long time. We got off Facebook to create our own network. And we started out, Martin working with a developer to create something open source and something different. And we ended up, using Mighty Networks, which is not censored, but I'm sure is like it's connected to the internet, like it's possible for surveillance and stuff, but it's given us our own private space with a different energy feel than Facebook did, and that was a big improvement. And so I haven't really used Facebook except I haven't gotten off of it like you were talking about. Like I go in to just connect with like local Tennessee groups or something, which is kind of funny. I guess I could make those connections without technology like we did back in the day. So anyway, like there are certain things I feel called, like where do I start? It's kind of like I was going to ask you a where do I start question at the end, but I feel like maybe the answer, but you tell me, is like for very basic, like if somebody's feeling overwhelmed, oh my God, how do I do? Like for me, I feel like there's just really certain things. I've felt called to make changes related to my phone. I feel called to get off Facebook completely. I feel called to not to have Sophia sit in a car for an hour and a half, which she does sometimes, and just look out the window with me and look at the trees. Like we do that too. But there are certain things that feel really strong for me personally, and maybe where we start is just where our heart is called. But I'm curious about that. We have kind of a wrap-up question or so, but like if somebody was feeling overwhelmed with all these changes, if it's a where to start, like what would you say? Just that could be a like practical thing or a like just, philosophical thing.
I guess it's more philosophical. And and we know that all of this technology it helps us and supports us in what we feel called to do, but it's also a big distraction a lot of the times. So I think the philosophical question I would start asking myself is, what's my purpose here? Why have I been sent at this time to Earth? And then what supports my purpose here on Earth? So once I know my purpose, what supports my purpose? And does checking my phone every 5 minutes for Instagram messages support my purpose here? If yes, then go do it. If no, then and I think it's once you can replace that urge to check your phone. It's this whole instant gratification thing where like we posted something on Instagram, we posted something on Facebook, we're waiting for likes, we're waiting for shares, we're waiting for all of that. When we don't get that, I mean, the social dilemma that's on Netflix is talking about that. But at the end of the day, our purpose feeds the whole energy field of the whole evolvement the universe is going through, and especially Earth is going through. But it's still pretty personal because only I can live my life, and I need to live my life because who else is going to live it? So the question is like, once I can replace all these addictions and this urges to check my phone, to check my computer and my emails, and I feel that for myself, it's like we're all in the same boat. But once you can replace that with your purpose, you have a straight, clear line and a straight, clear vision and focus. You know what you're doing it for. And when you spend an hour on YouTube wasting time watching the 10 most stupid car crashes, and you wasted an hour of your time following your purpose. And I know that we also need time to rest, but at the end, it's we can replace like this time we spend online or that we waste online. Let's put it that we waste online. We can replace it with working towards our purpose.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's great.
That's so beautiful. Yeah,
really good.
Such
Thank
a
you.
strong direction.
Well, I guess as a final question, it'd be interesting to kind of hear where you see this going. Like, what in terms of like the future? In what way does technology interact with our lives, in a healthy way, in a way that's not about surveillance and control. And it sort of feels like this reality is probably on the other side of some systems falling down. But where do you see tech in kind of in a healthy version of society? So maybe next year. But like, what's a way in which it can be a real tool for humanity and not a mechanism for enslavement?
I think the baseline is it will be what we make out of it. That's like the baseline. And let me give an example of, for example, the metaverse. And there can be this Facebook metaverse where, yeah, you basically, once the kid comes out, you put this goggles on it. And that's where they are. And with all of dystopian everything. But and there are also decentralized versions of the metaverse, like Sand, for example, Mana. These are crypto. They also have like the crypto tokens. And let me give you another version of the metaverse. We have communities, like physical communities all over the world. That and at the end, we all kind of have the same challenge. Energy is one challenge. Water is one challenge. Sustainability is one challenge, and so on. So there are different challenges that we can overcome. And now imagine a place, a metaverse, where we can cooperate, collaborate on these challenges. And we don't need to wait. We can also maybe simulate certain challenges. So we don't need to wait 10 years to see that the fiat money has just been pumped up, but we see it's just crashing. We don't need to wait 10 years. We could have already like got into alternative ways of thinking 10 years ago. So we could create a metaverse, a decentralized metaverse that is a way of collaborating and is a way of sharing technology that's not censored, is a way of all of these patents and so on. And I'm very much for, like, if someone invents something, that's amazing, but I think it's super, super important to share technology. And that's why I love this open source idea. And none of the softwares we are using today would work without open source. And it's just developers sitting there coding something that they need and sharing it with the world. And I think that's where technology needs to go towards. We need open source technology. So we have free energy for everyone. So we have clean water for everyone. The reason why, I mean, just having companies taking away our water so they can sell it back to us, there's something wrong. So there's like, it's a mindset shift that needs to happen here as well. So the metaverse can go in these two different directions. And cryptocurrencies, we can have the CDBC, which is like owned by the bank, controlled by the bank. You're not allowed to purchase some addresses because you haven't done this or that. So it's like this complete dystopian control structure. But there's also the decentralized version on the other side. And if we go into the decentralized version, if we support that, if 8 billion people would have gone into the decentralized version 10 years ago, then because now it's again these big companies jumping into Bitcoin, and yeah, it's again the whales that already have all of this money. And there was also a question around that, but crypto is a whole other topic. So we need to find something, or we need to create something that's for the communities, and where whales, and there are projects out there where whales just cannot get in. You're not able to. I recently, on this Tribalize event, I heard about a platform where you don't. How do they frame it? You're not. You don't have the most rights, the most voting rights, by the money that you invest, but by the money percentage-wise that you give back to the community. So the more money from whatever you get to give back to the community, the more voting power and the more voting rights you have. So it's a completely different approach. So you can have billions invested, and if you don't give back to the community, you have nothing to say. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful approach. So that's like with crypto, a lot of of changes and shifts also happening, which is beautiful. So these were just two examples of directions where things can go. And at the end of the day, it's what we make out of it. And I'm pretty sure there will be a bunch of people going one way and another bunch of people going the other way. And, you know, evolution has worked for, how old is the universe? Like for 16 billion years or 15 billion years. And it will work again. So whichever is evolutionary, the better system will at the end of the day work out.
Yeah, wow. Martin, thank you so much for this, for your time, for the big philosophical conversations, which were so wonderful and strong, and all the nitty-gritty details as well. Obviously, you've mentioned your course a lot, and we're going to have a workshop series upcoming in Ownstream as well. Maybe you can tell people, I know you just launched a website. Tell people where they can reach you if they want to connect with you on your website and your course, and we'll be sharing more information about the workshops as well.
So yeah, it's with my wife, and now we've already doing a lot of stuff together, but now we just went together into one company, and with that we kind of reframed and rethought, talking about how often should I like install and deinstall software and check that. Like, I guess the whole life is a process of reframing and recreating all the time. So that's what we've done now. We have like put all our offerings that we do, and it's a lot. I teach ecstatic dance. She does Akashic Records reading. I talk about digital security. We have our courses. We will soon launch a course, which might also be interesting for the community, about natural contraception. So how can you contracept without any hormones and any like external stuff? And it's a lot about like, yeah, understanding yourself, understanding the women's cycle, and so on. So it's we do a lot of different things, but it's on featherly.be. So like the feather. My wife is a big fan of feathers, as you can see in the back here. These are feathers.
Yeah, nice.
So it's feather
right now.
featherly.be, just for being. But I'm happy to share that as well. And the course is on our learning platform, the Modern Mystics Collective. Yeah, so that's basically how anyone can get in touch with me. And I'm also happy to have a group or join a group for direct questions. And yeah, so that's what I can offer so far. And we have two workshops next week. And I guess from the questions that you got in the chat and whatever we could not cover from the questions that people sent before, I think we could cover like a good bunch, but not all the questions. Yeah, we can continue in the more focused courses, workshops next week.
Yeah, we have 2 mini workshops scheduled with Martin next week, Tuesday, April 19th at 2 p.m. Eastern, and Thursday, the 21st at 8 p.m. Eastern, to try to reach all our time zones and interests. And definitely we'll follow up with everyone in the Ownstream network after this about what you'd most like to cover, because I know Martin's wanting to really like shape these toward what would be, most practical and useful, and has said that he may be interested in doing an ongoing series if it makes sense to kind of lead people through different practical steps. So this could be a recurring series, because as we knew going into this and discovered today, you really can only get through so much in a short amount of time. So I'll be asking people following this conversation what you'd really most like to cover, and we'll be talking to Martin about that before next week. So,
And Martin, with your course, do you
Yes.
have to go in and add and change things as the technology changes? Is that something you're constantly doing? Is your course sort of always up to speed?
Mm-hmm. The course covers the most important basics that won't change for a while. Like email will stay an insecure protocol, and VPN and firewall and so on is definitely something that is good to have. But and the course is online now for since roughly half a year. But so I haven't updated it yet, but there will be more stuff coming. And there's things that need to go into the course, and then there's things that are like more important to kind of share on a regular like mailing list or something like this. But I plan to keep it. And also, if there's something, if there's something missing, that's really important. And from the questions I received that you sent me, I can see that most of it is answered in the course. So I think I got a good overview in the course to answer most of these questions. And yeah, as like it's 15 sections, and the first 5 sections are free, so everyone is free to join and to see if they like what's shared, if they like the vibe. Yeah, it's, as you said, it's only so much, and like in 1.5 hours, getting like keeping the chords together of like keeping it easy enough so everyone can understand it. Your question about the VPN, I also explained the VPN in the course, but still like covering a lot, and then like keeping the strings together. So I hope I hope we didn't lose anyone on. But it's, yeah, we can keep we can continue in the workshops next week with more questions.
Very good.
That's great. I think it was a wonderful balance of what we were trying to navigate in terms of technical and more basic. So thank you so much, Martin. It's so fun to, with Our Bright Future, to get to make connections with people who feel so aligned. And you also have so much to offer our community. So I'm just really grateful that we've made this connection and ongoing relationship, and really enjoyed getting to hear from you today. So
Yeah, me
thank
too,
you.
Martin. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. It was a pleasure for me. It was a really big pleasure to share and to bring this awareness. And yeah, we're all about to create the new earth, right? And
Right.
so that's my passion.
Okay.
Okay, we're off. That was a